Today I'm going to be talking about which piece of client work has had the biggest impact on myself and why. I'm going to structure the presentation by going through all of the slides, but not necessarily going through every point on the slide because of the time limit. However, I have provided a handout for your reference which has all of the relevant information and any further information that I may not mention in the presentation. So you're welcome to read in your own time. And you can also email me with any questions, as I'm aware that the current situation prevents us from asking questions and answering questions face to face. So to begin, I'm going to start with a bit of background about my client. So Mr. TH was a client who was living in a home with severe damp problems. He had mould in every single room of his house. It was a significant contributing factor to his lung condition. So he was diagnosed with hypersensitivity pneumonitis and emotional instability in November 2018. So it was contributing to the deterioration of his physical and mental health. He tried to contact his landlord a number of times to resolve the issue, but when he didn't have any luck in resolving the issue, he made a formal complaint in January 2020, and he was offered alternative accommodation, in which he had to reject because it was unsuitable due to the fact that it didn't have any disabled parking. So he came to my partner and I asking for his rights over to be provided with a suitable home and whether his landlord owed him any obligations. Why did I choose this client in particular? It was the most memorable client out of all of the other client sessions. I can remember a lot more details compared to other client sessions. It triggered an emotional response from myself, which was particularly unexpected. I was thinking about this session for many weeks following this session, which was unusual because I'd had lots of client sessions before this which didn't have the same effect. I also became more empathetic as a result, so not just in a professional setting but in a personal setting. So my friends commented on the fact that I was more empathetic, which I pinpointed to this particular client session because of the noticeable change that I'd had in other aspects of my life, like thinking about this client session afterwards for a long period of time. The visible distress from the client was also particularly memorable. He was talking about a particular issue and he appeared particularly composed, but he had a single tear rolling down his cheek, which I found really distressing. And he also kept apologising for getting emotional, which many other clients did. And I found this particularly interesting because if they have an issue that is obviously having this much of an impact on them, of course they would become emotional. So this in turn triggered a reflection on the impact of the advice that we were giving, and it just made me want to ensure that I gave them the best outcome that I could offer, and that my research was thorough enough so I knew that the advice that I was giving was correct and that they could use it to help them with their situation. And I also liked that this client followed up with a message to thank us for the advice that we're giving. It's not a necessary requirement, but I thought it was really nice that he thanked us for our advice and said that he'd take all of our advice on board and updated us on his current situation. So this was a particularly rewarding aspect and again made me value the advice that I was giving. In terms of particular wider social issues, so I wanted to reflect on the lack of funding or legal aid, and this is reflected through the map that I have on the screen. The reason that I chose this particular issue was because not just in the client that I chose, but in all of my client sessions, they expressed the fact that they had a number of financial constraints, so that's why they were coming to the free legal advice clinic, and they were always keen to avoid the legal costs which were incurred from taking their issues to court, and that they wanted to resolve it as quickly as possible. So in the map on the screen, this shows housing legal aid providers or lack of. So you can see that the map is predominantly red, so this would suggest that there are hardly any housing legal aid providers, and there should be more. These areas are referred to as legal aid deserts, so lawyers are withdrawing from services which are no longer financially viable. So again, this makes access to justice more difficult. So this means that people on low incomes with complex legal issues might not necessarily get the face-to-face legal advice that they're in their local area that they're legally entitled to. So this creates a huge gap. So all of these people that are unable to seek the advice that they need, so it might leave some issues unresolved, continuing with their issues without seeking any advice, or alternatively using pro bono clinics, which is why there's an increased demand for pro bono clinics in recent years. So on the next slide, I've just pinpointed a few areas on this map that are obviously problematic. So I showed the figures of Leicester, so they have 3 housing legal aid providers, which is problematic, and in areas such as Oxford and Cambridge, there's hardly any, with predominantly red. You can't even see any other colour in there. But London is the only difference, so, or not the only difference, but it's the one I picked out to showcase. So there are more housing legal aid providers in this area, but I thought this was due to the fact that London is the capital, so there would be an increased demand for housing. However, if you click into the individual areas in London, the number still isn't that high, or as high as you would expect it to be because of the demand for housing. So this leads nicely onto the effectiveness of access to justice. So as I've mentioned, the legal aid deserts, which are increasingly problematic, the fact that more people are relying on pro bono clinics and they're unable to deal with this increasing demand due to the fact that they won't have an unlimited amount of funding to cater for everyone that comes to the clinic. Whether resources are effective to the public. So Mr. TH conducted some of his own research before coming to the legal advice clinic, but yet he still chose to come to us because he couldn't resolve the issue on his own or find the legal answer that he was looking for. And many other clients did the same thing when they would come to our client interview. So this questions whether the resources online are effective. Noting the resources that we use, predominantly we use the government website, but we'd also use sources such as LexisNexis and Westlaw, which the public won't have access to. But if we consider making the public able to have this information, this may cause another problem in itself because they may be unable to understand the legal terminology. So this also creates a huge problem. The fact that this system therefore favours wealthier individuals and puts the vulnerable and poor individuals at risk because they're unable to fund their legal issues. So in terms of personal development, the application of legal research to real life rather than theoretical problems was particularly important because it would increase my attention to detail skills because I'd make sure that I wanted to get it perfect because any mistakes that I would make would have a significant impact on the client's result, whereas with theoretical problems you can rectify the mistake immediately and there's no effect on a person, so there's less stress about this occurring. It definitely improved my research skills, so file management was a lot more efficient, so we'd often have lengthy client files where we'd have to sift through the information and pick out the most relevant points. So I would definitely say that my self-discipline skills have been improved in this, and it's also helped my research in my other modules because I'm more detailed in my research and also more precise. It's definitely improved my public speaking skills and increased my motivation and passion for the subject. The passion for the subject was something that I was losing in recent years as I felt like I didn't have a purpose or any direction, as I was unsure about my future career prospects. But after taking this module and particularly interacting with all of the clients and in particular Mr. TH, I found that I definitely do want to be a solicitor and this is something that I want to continue past my degree, whether it be pro bono work or working with people in my career to make sure that I can give them the best outcome possible when dealing with their legal issues. And this is something that I'm really thankful for because it was an area which I was struggling to figure out where I wanted to go. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it and I'll see you again soon.